The sky above Kumasi that morning was clear, the kind of deep, endless blue that made you believe in peace. It was the kind of sky that felt like a blessing, like the heavens were watching quietly, smiling down at what was about to happen. Inside, the Holy Revival Tabernacle, the large white church at the edge of the city, there was a strange kind of hush. Not silence. No, the choir's gentle humming floated through the air, and the soft rustle of dresses, fans, and polished shoes kept the space alive. But there was a deeper quiet beneath all of it, the kind that settles over people when something sacred is happening. And today was sacred. Tasha Owusu stood at the back of the church, veiled and glowing, as the large wooden doors behind her were gently closed. She was dressed in a gown of fine white silk, the train cascading behind her like a wave of light. Around her, bridesmaids in coral dresses adjusted her veil, whispered encouragements, and dabbed their eyes. The scent of shea butter and rose water clung to her skin. Her mother stood to one side, hand trembling, eyes shining with a mixture of pride and something heavier, older, something that couldn't be spoken out loud. It had taken years for Tasha to reach this moment, years of disappearing, of running, from the ruins of a life she no longer wanted. Years of keeping her head low, of rebuilding herself in silence, far from the whispers, the judgments, and the shame. And now here she was, about to marry Kojo Mensah, the kindest man she had ever met. He was a youth pastor, deeply respected, the kind of man people prayed their daughters would find. He was patient, thoughtful, and full of a grace that wasn't just preached but lived. Tasha had told him pieces of her story. Not everything, but enough. She had hoped it would be enough. The choir's voices rose slightly, signaling the start of the processional. A deep breath swelled in Tasha's chest, her arm linked with her father's, an old, proud man with weathered hands and eyes that had seen too much but still looked at her with unshakable love. He whispered, "Let's walk, my daughter." And they began. Step by step, Tasha walked the long aisle of the church, each stride feeling like a sentence in a chapter she thought she had already closed. The congregation rose, hundreds of eyes turning toward her, some full of joy, others simply watching. The sun filtered through the high stained glass windows, casting colors across the pews and the polished floor. Reds and blues shimmered on her dress, on her hands, on her face. It was like she was walking through a river of light. The air was thick with perfume and anticipation. Cameras clicked quietly, recording the moment. Older women wept into handkerchiefs. Young girls stared wide-eyed, dreaming of one day walking like this. And there at the altar stood Kojo, tall and steady in a dark navy suit, a small Bible clutched in his hands. His eyes never left hers. He smiled, not the wide, excited smile of a groom caught up in the show of it all, but something calmer, deeper. It was the smile of a man who truly loved. And in that moment, Tasha believed everything would be okay. She reached him. Her father placed her hand into Kojo's, nodded, and stepped back. The officiating pastor opened his Bible and began to speak. His voice echoed softly through the sanctuary, quoting scripture, calling on the holiness of marriage, speaking of forgiveness, unity, and truth. Tasha's hands trembled slightly, but Kojo squeezed them gently, as if to say, "I'm here." But then, just as the pastor asked if anyone had reason this couple should not be joined, there was a loud, sharp sound. Bang! The church doors slammed open. Every head turned. A murmur rolled through the room like thunder through dry leaves. At the entrance stood a woman, tall, fierce-eyed, and visibly shaking with emotion. Her dress was plain. Her heels clicked loudly as she stepped forward, and in her hand, raised, like a weapon, was a phone. Its screen glowed, paused on a frozen image that no one could yet see, but her voice carried, clear and strong. "I know this woman. she said. Gasps echoed across the pews. She's not who you think she is. The woman continued, stepping further down the aisle. I have proof. You all should see what kind of past she's hiding. Tasha froze. The blood drained from her face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The choir had gone silent. The pastor's Bible trembled in his hands. Kojo looked at the woman, then at Tasha. His eyes filled not with rage, but confusion. Pain. The woman tapped the phone screen. The video played. A flickering image appeared, grainy footage of a younger Tasha, wild-eyed, dancing in a dark club. Another cut. This time, a heated argument with a man, slurred words, a slap. Then another. Tasha laughing, throwing a bottle. At a police car. There were more. Gasps turned to whispers, whispers to judgment. Eyes widened. Someone in the back began recording on their phone. Tasha stood still, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. For a moment, everything inside her wanted to run, to flee down the aisle, out the doors, into the streets of Kumasi. Just like she used to, but she didn't run. Slowly, she turned to Kojo. Her lips parted, and in a voice that trembled but didn't break, she said, It's true. The silence was sharp. Even the woman with the phone seemed caught off guard. Tasha swallowed. All of it. It's true. But I'm not that woman anymore. I haven't been for a long time. I've changed. For a moment, Kojo didn't move. His face held every emotion, shock, betrayal, grief, but also something else, something flickering. He turned slowly and faced the crowd. His voice, when he spoke, was low but strong. If grace can cover me, he said, his voice breaking, it can cover her too. And with that, he took Tasha's hand again, firmly, publicly. But the air inside that church had changed. Not everyone clapped, not everyone smiled. Some people stood in stunned silence. Others turned away. They were still going to marry, but it would not be under perfection. It would be under protest and truth. The morning after the wedding, the sky over Kumasi was still blue, but it felt colder, sharper, like it had seen something it couldn't forget. Outside, traffic moved like normal. Trotros blared their horns, the markets were alive, and children chased each other past potholes and mango vendors. But inside the small apartment Kojo and Tasha now shared, the silence was a different kind. Heavy, swollen, waiting to burst. They hadn't spoken much since returning from the church. The ceremony had continued, though the air was tense, almost unwilling. There were no standing ovations, only quiet murmurs. People whispered as they walked past, some refusing to meet Tasha's eyes, others glaring as if she had personally offended their sense of righteousness. The woman who had interrupted the wedding had slipped out just before the vows were finished, her phone still in hand, her mission complete. Now, Tasha sat at the edge of the bed, still wearing the silk wrapper from the night before, her eyes red but dry. The makeup had long faded, her face bare, no masks, no illusions, just her, the real Tasha. Kojo stood by the window, looking out, hands in his pockets, shoulders stiff. The breeze pushed the curtains gently, but he didn't move. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't accused her, but he hadn't touched her either. Tasha wanted to explain more, but the words didn't feel like they would matter. What could she say that the whole church hadn't already seen? Those videos weren't lies. They weren't manipulated. She remembered each moment, nights she hated herself, faces she couldn't forget, decisions she would carry like stones forever. She finally spoke. I should have told you everything, she whispered. Kojo turned slightly, not enough to face her. Why didn't you? I was afraid. Her voice cracked. Afraid you'd see me like they do. Like I'm still that girl. You're not, he said quietly. She looked at him. Then why can't you look at me? He turned now, slowly, his eyes tired but not cruel. Because they were looking at me too, Tasha. And all I could think was, maybe I don't know how to carry this. Silence again. Then, a knock at the door. They both flinched. It was too early for visitors. Tasha stood, instinctively wrapping her arms around herself. Kojo opened the door a crack and sighed. It was his older brother, Kwame, the opposite of Kojo in almost every way, louder, tougher, less forgiving. He stepped inside without being invited, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Tasha. I came to talk to you, he said, directing it at Kojo but clearly addressing her too. Kojo closed the door. Kwame, now's not— No, Kwame cut in. It's exactly the time. You made a decision yesterday that shook the whole family. You stood there and married someone who— Say it, Tasha said. Her voice was low, calm. Say what you think. Kwame looked at her hard. You think being married to a pastor makes your past disappear? Do you know how many church members have called us already? Some are leaving the ministry. Donations are dropping. And you, he pointed at Kojo, you're the face of the youth ministry. What does this say to the kids? Kojo opened his mouth, but Tasha stepped forward. It says redemption is real. Kwame laughed bitterly. No, it says standards don't matter. That anyone can do anything and walk into God's house and expect applause. No one applauded, she said. They looked at me like I was dirt. I didn't expect applause. I expected honesty. And you got it, Kwame snapped. That's what honesty looks like. Shame. Kojo stepped between them. That's enough. Kwame looked at his brother, eyes narrowed. You're going to lose everything. Then let me lose it for the right reason, Kojo said. Let me lose it because I stood for someone when no one else would. The room tensed. Kwame stared at Kojo for a long moment, then scoffed and walked out. The door shut with a soft, final thud. Tasha sat back down. Kojo exhaled deeply and sat beside her. They didn't touch. Not yet. But the space between them felt smaller now, less like a wall, more like a bridge waiting to be built. Later that week, the backlash began to rise. Whispers turned into sermons. 2 assistant pastors resigned. Parents pulled their teenagers from youth classes. Tasha's name appeared on anonymous WhatsApp broadcasts with edited clips of the wedding crash. Headlines popped up on social media. Pastor marries ex-party girl. Church reacts. Everywhere she went, markets, banks, even the pharmacy, people stared. Some asked questions disguised as kindness. Others simply turned their backs. But the worst was yet to come. One night, after a community prayer meeting where Kojo spoke about forgiveness and the power of second chances, he and Tasha walked to their car only to find the windshield smashed. Written across the hood in red paint were the words, "Not holy enough." Tasha dropped to her knees. She didn't cry. She just stared. Kojo stood frozen, then knelt beside her, slowly wrapping his arms around her for the first time in days. I didn't marry a perfect woman, he whispered. I married a brave one. She didn't respond, but her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. As they drove away that night, the city looked different. Not colder, but honest. Like it had peeled back its mask and shown them what grace would cost. And it would cost them everything. 2 weeks after the wedding, Tasha stood barefoot on her mother's old veranda in Atonsu, watching ants crawl along a crack in the cement. The house hadn't changed much. Same fading peach walls, same green door that stuck when it rained. But something inside Tasha had shifted. Not just from the wedding, or the broken windshield, or the slow crumble of public grace. Something deeper was moving. Something that had been asleep for too long. She had started dreaming again. Restless, broken dreams. In one, she was drowning in a pool of red wine. In another, she stood in a church, naked, while everyone threw Bibles at her. But the worst was the recurring one. She stood in front of a child, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, whose face she could never see. The girl would reach for her, whisper something she couldn't hear, and then vanish in smoke. That dream came every few nights, leaving her breathless in bed. Kojo tried to comfort her, but he was exhausted too. The ministry had suffered. Church elders had summoned him twice. Donations were down by nearly half. They suggested he take a sabbatical to protect his spirit. But Tasha knew what it really meant. Step down quietly, or they would. Push harder. One night, as they lay on opposite sides of the bed, Kojo asked her softly, "Is there more?" She turned slowly. "What do you mean?" He looked up at the ceiling. "Your past. What people saw. Was it everything?" She hesitated. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe the worst had already been exposed, but her silence answered him. Kojo didn't press further. He only sighed, the sound heavy enough to bend walls. The next morning, Tasha went to see someone she hadn't faced in 7 years, Essie Bempa, her oldest friend. The last time they spoke, Essie had screamed at her outside a nightclub in Osu, calling her reckless, selfish, a coward. They hadn't spoken since. Essie opened the door slowly, surprised. She wore a loose wrapper and had a baby strapped to her back. Her face hardened slightly, but she stepped aside. "You finally showed up," Essie said flatly. Tasha nodded. "I'm not here to fight. I didn't say you were, but you should have come years ago." They sat in the living room, small, warm, filled with the scent of baby powder and plantain oil. For a while, they didn't speak. Then Tasha said, "I've been dreaming about her." Essie froze. "You remember?" Tasha nodded, eyes burning. Not everything, but enough. Her voice, her face. Essie stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out. "You left me to deal with everything. You disappeared. You made me lie to your own blood. I couldn't face it. You chose not to face it." The room was thick with pain. Then, finally, Tasha said the thing she had never said out loud. "I got pregnant that year." Essie didn't turn around. "I know," Tasha continued, voice shaking. "I didn't tell anyone. I was scared. I was drinking. Everything was a blur. I told myself I'd figure it out. But then the bleeding started." Now Essie turned, her face softer now. "You didn't lose her?" Tasha blinked. "What?" "You didn't lose her, Tasha. You gave her up." Silence fell like a slap. Tasha's breath caught. "No, that's not true. I would remember." "You blocked it out," Essie said gently. "You went to a private clinic in Aburi. You signed the papers. I was with you. You cried the whole way back. You made me promise never to speak of it again." Tasha was shaking now, lips trembling. "I thought she died. She didn't. She's alive, living with a foster family in Ho. A good family. I checked once." The world tilted. Tasha felt the room spinning, like all the air had been sucked out. "I have a daughter." "You always did." Tasha ran to the bathroom and vomited. She stayed on the cold tile floor, heaving, sobbing, memory after memory slamming into her like waves. The face in the dream, the whisper she never understood. It wasn't guilt. It was grief. When she emerged, Essie handed her a cloth and sat beside her. For the first time in years, they held each other. That night, Tasha returned home to Kojo. She found him asleep on the couch, Bible open beside him, lines highlighted, underlined. She sat beside him and told him everything. The pregnancy, the clinic, the truth she had buried even from herself. Kojo didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I married you knowing you were broken, but I didn't know how deep the break went." She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I need to see her," she said quietly. "I'll come with you." That surprised her. "You will?" He looked at her, eyes full of quiet sorrow. "I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I believe in resurrection. And you need this." So they went. 3 days later, they traveled to Ho, a quiet town near the Volta region, where roads twisted through. Hills and time moved slower. They met the Foster family, a kind couple, retired teachers, who had cared for the girl since she was 2. They called her Amma. She loved to read. She liked mangoes and was afraid of goats. When Tasha saw her for the first time, playing in the dust with a stick and a rock, the ground seemed to vanish beneath her. She didn't run to Amma. She didn't force anything. She just knelt, tears falling freely. Amma looked up and tilted her head. Then, slowly, she walked over and touched Tasha's cheek. "You're the lady from my dreams," she said. Tasha broke, right there, in the dirt, in front of the family, in front of Kojo. The past had found her, but this time, it wasn't crashing anything. It was offering something back. The return journey from Ho to Kumasi felt longer than the road itself. Outside the car window, the world blurred into green hills, muddy rivers, and distant smoke from cooking fires. Inside, Tasha sat in silence, her fingers brushing the edge of a small drawing Amma had given her before they left. A stick figure of a woman with long hair standing beside a little girl under a bright yellow sun. No words had been exchanged about the future yet. The foster parents hadn't asked for anything. Kojo hadn't spoken much since they got back in the car, and Tasha herself couldn't find the language for the storm unraveling inside her. She had seen her daughter, touched her, heard her laugh, but Amma didn't yet know she was her mother, and Tasha knew she couldn't just step into that title because of blood. Not yet. Maybe not ever. When they reached home, Kojo parked the car, killed the engine, and turned toward her. "What now?" he asked. Tasha stared ahead, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." He waited. "You want to fix it all, Tasha," he said gently. "But some things don't need fixing. They need facing." She nodded, and the next day, she started facing them. She didn't return to the shadows. She didn't wait for rumors to fade or for gossip to die out. She walked straight into it. On Sunday morning, instead of skipping service or sitting quietly in the back, she walked into the Holy Revival Tabernacle, alone, not dressed in white, not veiled, in a simple dress, hair pulled back, no makeup. The sanctuary hushed when she entered, a few gasps, a few stares. Someone murmured her name. Some looked away, ashamed of what they had said behind closed doors. Others whispered coldly, "She." Walked past them all and sat on the front pew. Pastor Appia, the head of the church, stood behind the pulpit. He watched her quietly for a moment, then returned to his sermon. But there was a pause in his voice, a shift. Later, after service, Kojo approached the elders. He requested that Tasha be given 10 minutes to speak at the next youth gathering. They were hesitant, tense, but finally they agreed. And when that day came, the church hall was packed, not because people supported her, but because they were curious, hungry for scandal, thirsty for shame. Tasha stood in front of them all, teenagers, parents, elders, strangers, and told the truth. Not the polished version, not the clean one. She told them about growing up in a strict house, being pushed into silence, and how that silence turned into rebellion. How her need for attention led her to places she now regretted. How she spiraled. How she hurt people. How she lost a child, not to death but to her own fear. She told them she had failed herself, And then she told them how she found Kojo, how he loved her with eyes that didn't look away, how he asked her to stand beside him at the altar, not because she was perfect, but because she was honest. No applause followed her story, just silence, heavy, thick. But this time, it didn't feel like shame. It felt like weight shifting, like walls cracking. Afterwards, a girl, 16, wearing a borrowed dress and secondhand shoes, came up to her. She didn't say anything. She just hugged Tasha tightly, burying her face into her shoulder. Others followed, slowly, one by one. Some had stories, some had none. But all of them had wounds, and they saw something in Tasha that they hadn't seen before. Permission to bleed in the open. Kojo later told her that same week, "Your story will save more people than my sermons ever could." But the journey didn't end there. Tasha began therapy. She started volunteering at a home for teenage girls. She returned to Ho twice. The second time, she brought a box of storybooks and mangoes. She sat with Amma beneath the guava tree. They talked, laughed, drew pictures. Amma still didn't call her mom. Tasha didn't ask her to. She just showed up, again and again, every time. One afternoon, as they painted small rocks in the backyard, Amma looked up and asked, "Do you think people can have two families?" Tasha paused. "I think people can have as much love as their heart can hold." Amma nodded like she understood. Then she added, "My heart feels big when you're here." That night, Tasha wept. Not from sorrow, but from the kind of joy that feels like grief healed. Months passed. The church changed slowly. Some members left, others returned. Kojo was reinstated quietly, with conditions. Tasha never again sat in silence. When she spoke now, people listened. Not because of her name, but because of her scars. She carried them like medals now. Not proudly, but honestly. At a women's conference later that year, she stood in front of hundreds and told them, "Your past is not your prison, but hiding it can be." There were tears, there was applause, but more importantly, there was understanding. The key night she and Kojo celebrated their 1-year anniversary, he handed her a card. Inside was a simple sentence. "Thank you for choosing to stay visible." Tasha looked at him across the candlelight and whispered, "Thank you for choosing to stay." And in that moment, with the echoes of her broken past still somewhere out, there she smiled. Not because she had erased them, but because she had survived them out loud.